The first time they told me I was too old to fight for my own home, I almost didn't hear it. My daughter-in-law, Elaine, stood there, shaking her head as if I were already a lost cause, while my granddaughter, Lucy, stared at me with those judgmental eyes, the ones that always seemed to see through me. It hit me like a freight train. My son had passed away last year, and now, suddenly, I was no longer worth the effort. The house, the only place that ever truly felt like home, was nothing more than an inconvenience to them. My granddaughter, the sweet girl I'd raised for years, didn't see me as a strong woman anymore, just an old burden. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I'm Grace Caldwell, 72 years old, living in a small house on the outskirts of Norman, Oklahoma. You wouldn't think much of it if you drove by, just a simple, two-story home with a front porch where I've spent countless afternoons rocking in my chair, watching the world go by. You see, I've always kept to myself, not much for the fuss, not much for the drama. I was content to be in the background of my family's life, quietly supporting them, watching them grow. But that was before everything fell apart. When my son, Sam, passed away last year, I thought it would be the hardest thing I'd ever face. What I didn't know was that the real battle wasn't over losing him, it was over losing my place in my own family. Elaine and I had never been particularly close, but I always thought I was there for her, especially after Sam passed. Yet, it seemed she was more interested in settling his affairs than in taking care of me. And Lucy, she was just a kid, or so I thought. But seeing her stand beside her mother, agreeing with everything Elaine said, made me feel like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't just about the house, no, it was bigger than that. They were taking everything from me, one piece at a time. My dignity, my freedom, my memories. All being stripped away under the guise of taking care of me. They talked as if I couldn't understand what was happening, but I'd lived through things they couldn't even imagine. I wasn't weak. And I sure as hell wasn't about to let them take my home. But where did I start? Who could I trust now? That was the question that kept me up at night. Because deep down, I knew I had to fight. For my family. For myself, but that fight? That's where it all begins. I didn't want to believe it at first. Not after all those years of silence, after watching the way Elaine and Lucy had treated me. But the letter? Well, that was the moment I knew my world was about to shatter in ways I hadn't prepared for. The morning was quiet. Too quiet, as I sat in my kitchen, staring at the yellowing envelope that had somehow slipped through the cracks. It was sealed with a faded stamp, something I'd seen 1,000 times but had never really paid attention to. The handwriting was unmistakable, though, it was my son's. Sam. I sat there, frozen, as if I were waiting for the letter to explain itself. My hands trembled as I carefully peeled the seal open, each tear of the paper feeling like it was pulling me deeper into a reality I didn't want to face. "Mom," it started. I could almost hear Sam's voice in those two simple words. My heart twisted. "I know you'll read this someday, but I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't prepared for what came next. As I read on, everything I thought I knew about my son was ripped away. He'd been keeping secrets, big ones. There were debts. So many debts. And it wasn't just financial, it was emotional, too. He'd been hiding things from me, things about Elaine, things about our family. My stomach churned with the weight of it all. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or just lost. There was more. The letter spoke of his wishes, his hopes for me, and, God help me, his request that I never tell Elaine about this. But how could I not? Everything had changed. The trust, the foundation of our family, had cracked in an instant. Before I tell you what I did next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. For the next few days, I couldn't bring myself to confront Elaine. I was still reeling from the letter, unable to understand how Sam could have kept something so big from me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no turning back. If I didn't speak up now, everything Sam had worked for, everything I had worked for, would slip through my fingers, and so, I made a decision. I was going to confront Elaine. I was going to demand answers. But the real question was, could I trust her? Would she even care about the truth, or had her ambition already poisoned everything? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like someone was waiting for me to make a mistake. Maybe that was just the guilt gnawing at me, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be forgotten. Not again. The house had always been a sanctuary for me, even before Sam was born. I remember the first time I stepped through the front door, fresh out of college, my heart full of dreams of the life I would build with my husband. It smelled like fresh wood and old paper. The kind of smell you can only get in a house that has been loved, lived in, and passed down through generations. But when I stood there that afternoon, holding Sam's letter in my hand, I realized something I'd never noticed before. The house wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing thing, holding secrets I had never known. I'd lived in it for so long, never questioning its walls, its floors, or its creaky staircase. But after reading that letter, I saw it in a different light. Every room felt colder, darker, as though the house itself was keeping something from me. I found myself wandering through the old rooms, retracing my steps from years gone by. The familiar comfort of the worn armchair in the living room, where I used to sit with Sam as a boy, seemed too still. The kitchen, with its cracked tiles and worn countertops, was no longer a place of warmth. Even the staircase creaked differently under my weight, like it was trying to tell me something. It wasn't until I reached the attic that I found it. The dust had settled thick on the floorboards, and the air felt stale. But there, in the farthest corner, was a small wooden chest that hadn't been there before. At least, I didn't remember it. I've always prided myself on knowing every inch of this house, but this chest was a mystery. With trembling hands, I opened it, half expecting it to be nothing more than old, forgotten junk. But inside, I found something that took my breath away, a collection of old documents and photographs. Sam's handwriting covered the tops of several papers. My heart skipped a beat as I skimmed through the first few pages. They were legal documents, signed and notarized. I couldn't make sense of all the jargon, but one word jumped out at me: will. I pulled one of the papers free and read it aloud to myself, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a letter, addressed to Sam's lawyer, stating that if anything happened to him, I was to be kept out of all decisions about the house. My head spun. This was the second blow to my gut in a matter of days. Not only had Sam been hiding debts, but he had made legal arrangements to keep me out of the family home in the event of his death. The one place that had always been mine, my sanctuary, had been given away without my knowledge or consent. Before I tell you what I did next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I knew right then that I had to confront Elaine. There were no more secrets to hide. This was no longer about debts or legal documents, it was about the future of my family. And I wasn't going down without a fight, but how was I going to tell Elaine what I had found? She would never believe me. She had already dismissed my concerns. But something told me I couldn't trust her to do the right thing, not anymore. The old house wasn't just holding secrets, it was holding a truth I wasn't ready to face. And now I had to figure out what to do with it. The day I decided to confront Elaine, my hands were shaking so badly I thought the whole world could see my fear. But inside, I knew I had no choice. I'd found the truth, and the truth was never something you could just bury. It would claw its way to the surface, no matter how hard you tried to ignore it. Elaine had been avoiding me for days, and I knew why. She was scared. She knew what I had found, and she wasn't prepared for me to expose it. The house, the will, everything, it was all coming to a head. I didn't care anymore about being polite or keeping the peace. This wasn't about my reputation or my pride. It was about what was mine. And she had no right to take it from me. When she walked into the living room that afternoon, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking at me directly. She knew. She could feel the storm that was coming. And yet, she still tried to play it off like nothing was wrong. "Grace, you're looking a little pale," she said, the words coming out too sweet, too practiced. "Is everything all right?" I looked at her for a long moment, trying to find the right words, but there was no need for pretense anymore. "No, Elaine," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Everything is not all right." "Grace, you're looking a little pale," she said, the words coming out too sweet, too practiced. "Is everything all right?" I looked at her for a long moment, trying to find the right words, but there was no need for pretense anymore. "No, Elaine," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Everything is not all right." I held up the letter Sam had written, the one that had shattered the illusion of peace we had tried to maintain after his death. Her eyes flickered for a split second, and that was all the confirmation I needed. She knew. "Grace, I don't know what you think you've found, but this really isn't the time for," she started, her voice rising as if she could control the situation with her words. But I wasn't having it anymore. "You listen to me," I cut her off, my voice sharp. "I've spent my life letting people take things from me. I've watched you take from me, my son, my place in this family, and now, you're trying to take my home." I stepped closer, holding up the letter for her to see. "Sam made decisions behind my back, Elaine. And you've been hiding them all along. But this house was never yours to take." Her face went pale, and I could see her struggling to maintain control. But I wasn't backing down. I'd had enough of being the quiet, compliant woman everyone thought they could walk all over. "Grace," she said, her voice shaky now, "you don't understand. This house, it's not just yours. There are debts, I know about the debts," I interrupted, feeling the anger rise in my chest. "I know about the legal arrangements Sam made. You thought you could sweep it all under the rug, didn't you? But you can't hide behind that anymore. You and Lucy both think I'm just an old woman with no fight left in her, but you're wrong. I'm not going anywhere. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching." There was a long, painful silence between us, and for a moment, I thought she might break down and confess everything. But then she just stared at me, her face a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I didn't want this, Grace. I didn't want it to get this far. But you don't understand how much this house is worth, how much it could do for Lucy and me." "Don't you dare use Lucy as an excuse," I snapped. "This isn't about her. This is about you and me, about what's right." Her lips tightened, and I could see the decision weighing on her. For a brief moment, I thought she might finally concede, but instead, she spoke the words that shattered my resolve. "You're too old to fight for this. You can't win. I'll make sure of it." I stood there, frozen, as the weight of her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The battle wasn't over yet. I should have seen it coming, the way everything started to unravel, piece by piece, until it felt like the whole world was crumbling around me. After that confrontation with Elaine, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this whole mess than I had first realized. The house wasn't just about debts or legalities. It was something deeper, something more personal. The night after the fight, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window, made me jump. I kept thinking about the look on Elaine's face, the fear, the guilt, and most of all, the way she'd tried to justify everything with her empty excuses. But what really haunted me was that damn letter. The one that told me Sam had been hiding things, that he hadn't trusted me enough to share the truth before his death. So, I did what I had to do. I went back to the attic, the place where I'd found the chest, and I started to go through everything again. The old documents, the legal papers, all of it. I needed answers, even if they were answers I wasn't ready to hear. I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on me, like it was suffocating me, trapping me in a web of secrets and lies, and that's when I found it, the final piece to the puzzle. It was tucked away at the bottom of the chest, hidden behind stacks of papers I hadn't bothered to go through the first time. The moment I pulled it out, I knew it was important. The envelope was old, yellowed with age, but the seal was still intact. The handwriting was unmistakable, Sam's. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and pulled the letter free. I could feel the cold sweat on my palms as I read it. This letter was different. It wasn't like the others I'd seen, full of business jargon and legal speak. This one was personal, a message to me. "Mom," it began. "I've made some choices that I'm not proud of. But I need you to understand, I never wanted to hurt you. The debts, the legal stuff, it's all been so overwhelming. But Elaine, she's not who you think she is. She's not the woman you see in front of you. I've seen her change, and I've been scared. I've been scared for you, for Lucy, and for what's coming." My hands shook harder as I read the rest. The letter went on to explain how Elaine had been hiding things from me, not just the debts, but her own financial struggles. And most damning of all, Sam admitted that he had been keeping secrets from me to protect me. But protect me from what? I couldn't understand. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Elaine wasn't just after the house for the money, it was more than that. She wanted control. Control over everything. Over Sam's estate, over Lucy's future, over my place in the family. And Sam had known this, which is why he'd written this letter. He hadn't trusted Elaine with everything, but he hadn't trusted me enough either. The realization stung, cutting deeper than anything else had before. Before I tell you what I did next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I was no longer just fighting for my home. I was fighting for the truth. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I couldn't face Elaine again without knowing everything. Without confronting the woman she had become and understanding the reasons behind all her actions. But how could I do that? How could I confront her now, knowing what I knew? The stakes were higher than they'd ever been. The truth had a way of making things worse, not better. But I couldn't keep running from it. The time had come for a reckoning. The more I thought about the truth, the more I realized there was only one way forward. I had to fight. I had to take this battle beyond the walls of my home, beyond the small town where everyone knew each other's business. I had to go to court. The thought of it terrified me. I wasn't a young woman anymore. My knees ached when I walked, my hands were always stiff with arthritis, and my mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be. But when it came to something as important as my home, my future, there was no turning back. I wasn't going to let Elaine win. Not like this. I hired a lawyer, someone who came highly recommended by a friend of a friend. His name was Carl, and he was about as friendly as a brick wall, but he knew the law, and that's what mattered. He sat me down in his office one afternoon, his gray suit making him look even older than me, and explained the legal steps we would need to take. I know this is difficult, Mrs. Caldwell, he said. His voice low and measured, but we have a chance. It's going to be a tough road. Elaine has already got her own lawyer, and they'll fight dirty. But we've got the evidence on our side. The letter you found, the legal documents, it all proves she was trying to take advantage of you. I nodded, even though I wasn't entirely sure what any of it meant. I didn't understand all the legal jargon, and I certainly didn't like the idea of airing our family's dirty laundry in front of a courtroom full of strangers. But I couldn't just sit back and let them take everything. I wouldn't let them erase me. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. As the days passed, I spent hours going through every document I had, gathering anything that could support my case. The legal papers, the letters from Sam, and even the old photographs of our family. I had to prove that this house wasn't just some asset, it was my legacy. My memories. My life. Carl filed the initial paperwork, and the legal process began. I didn't sleep well those nights, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if I lost? What if Elaine was right, and I really was too old to fight? What if I couldn't keep the house? The questions gnawed at me, but I couldn't stop now. This was bigger than me. This was about making sure that Sam's death wasn't in vain, that I wasn't going to be erased from my own family's history. The first court hearing came sooner than I expected. I remember walking into that sterile, cold room, the smell of polished wood and stale air hanging heavy around me. I dressed as best as I could, but I could feel the eyes on me, the judgment in the air. My daughter-in-law, Elaine, sat at the other side of the room, her lawyer beside her, both of them glaring at me like they were waiting for me to crumble, but I wasn't going to crumble. Not this time. Elaine's lawyer stood up first, and he made his case. The house was a part of Sam's estate, and as the executor, Elaine had every right to sell it and move on with her life. He spoke with such confidence, such authority, that for a moment, I wondered if I was fighting a losing battle. But then it was my turn. Carl stood beside me, presenting the evidence. The letters, the documents, and Sam's last wishes, all of it pointed to the same truth. Elaine had manipulated the situation, using Sam's death to take control of everything. The house wasn't just a financial asset to her. It was a way to erase me from the family's history, before I could say a word, Elaine's lawyer spoke again. This time with a tone that sent a chill down my spine. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said. His eyes narrowing, "You are, at your age, incapable of making the decisions that are best for you. This house is no longer in your best interest. It's time to let go." His words hung in the air like a heavy weight, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to let him push me around. Not now. Not ever. I stood up, my voice trembling at first, but then growing stronger with each word. "I'm not too old," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not too old to fight for what's mine. And I'm not too old to know what's best for me. You don't get to decide that for me. Not anymore." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air. I could feel the eyes on me, but I didn't care. This was my moment. I wasn't going to back down. "Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching." The judge looked at me, his eyes hard, but there was a flicker of respect in them. And just like that, I knew the battle wasn't over, but I had at least made my stand. The fight had just begun, but I wasn't going to lose this one. I never expected help from anyone outside my family. I had always been the type to handle things on my own, even when life seemed like it was pushing me to the brink. But the truth was, I had no idea how much I needed an ally until one appeared out of nowhere. It all started a few weeks after the court hearing. I was sitting in the same old chair by the window, staring out at the overgrown yard, when the knock on the door startled me. At first, I thought it was just the postman. But when I opened it, I found someone standing there I hadn't seen in years, George Walker. The local mechanic who'd been a close friend of Sam's. "Grace," he said. His voice full of warmth, "I heard about what's going on. Thought you might need someone in your corner." I stood there for a moment, surprised by the sight of him. I hadn't seen George in over a decade, not since Sam's funeral. He'd always been there when I needed a helping hand, but after Sam's death, everyone had disappeared. Everyone except Elaine. "George, I don't know what to say." I trailed off, not knowing whether to let him in or shut the door in his face. What could he possibly want with all this family drama? He must have read the confusion in my eyes because he smiled softly and stepped into the doorway. "I don't need to say much. But I know this house better than anyone else. I used to work on the plumbing here, and I know every inch of it. If you need a witness, well, I'm your guy." My heart raced. Of course, I remembered George's visits to the house back in the day. He had worked on the plumbing, fixed the pipes, and done small repairs. He knew the house better than almost anyone, and he had been close to Sam. If anyone could help me prove that Elaine didn't have the right to take what wasn't hers, it was George, but I had no idea how far he was willing to go. "Are you sure about this, George?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "I mean, it's all legal stuff. And with Elaine and her lawyer throwing everything at me." He nodded, his face serious. "I don't like what's happening to you, Grace. I've known you for too long to just sit back and let someone steal what's yours. And I'm not the only one. I've talked to a few of Sam's old friends, and they're willing to back you up, too." I could hardly believe my ears. Sam's friends, some of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, were willing to support me? The weight of it all hit me then. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling the first flicker of hope I'd had in months. "Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching." Over the next few days, George came by several times, going over old records and helping me piece together the history of the house. He wasn't just some bystander. He was all in, and his support gave me the courage to keep going. We dug through Sam's old files, uncovering more pieces of evidence that I hadn't thought to look for before. Bills, receipts, photographs, it was all there, and it painted a different picture than what Elaine had been trying to sell. But it wasn't just the legal evidence that made the difference. It was the emotional support. George didn't just offer me advice. He offered his presence. He was a reminder that not all of Sam's friends had turned their backs on me. And slowly, I began to see the cracks in Elaine's carefully constructed walls. The more we uncovered, the more I realized how deep this whole thing went. Elaine's plan wasn't just about money, it was about erasing everything Sam and I had built together. She was trying to rewrite our history, but I wasn't going to let her. Not now. Not ever. The battle was far from over. But with George's help, I felt a renewed sense of strength. I had allies now, and that made all the difference. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. With George by my side, I felt like I could finally see a way forward. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for my family's legacy, and for the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't fighting alone. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and full of judgment. I hadn't been back since that first hearing, but now, as the day of the trial loomed closer, it felt like everything was coming down to this one moment. The final showdown between me and Elaine. The moment that would decide the fate of everything I had left. I wasn't going to back down. No matter how much she tried to push me, no matter how much she believed she had already won. I had one thing she didn't, something more powerful than money. More important than legal documents. I had the truth. It was the day before the trial, and I sat at my kitchen table. A cup of tea in front of me, but I hadn't taken a sip. I couldn't. My nerves were frayed, my hands trembled. But I wasn't going to let the fear control me. I had come too far. George had been with me every step of the way, poring over the documents, helping me organize everything for court. He was there with me now, sitting quietly across from me as I stared at the family photo on the wall, a photo of Sam and me, smiling, before the world got so complicated. You ready for tomorrow? George asked, his voice calm and reassuring. His presence had become a comfort, something I hadn't realized I needed. I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know if I was ready. How could anyone be ready for something like this? But I had no choice. If I didn't do this, if I didn't take a stand now, everything Sam and I had built together would be taken away. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. The next morning, I put on my best dress, one I hadn't worn in years, but one that made me feel like the woman I used to be. I didn't wear makeup, but I didn't need to. The lines on my face told my story. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, every step heavy with the weight of what was at stake. Elaine and her lawyer were already there, sitting smugly on the opposite side of the room. I could feel their eyes on me, sizing me up like they thought I'd crumble at any moment. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what it meant to fight for what you loved, for what was yours. Carl, my lawyer, was with me now, standing beside me, presenting the evidence we had gathered. The letters from Sam, George's testimony, all the documents that proved Elaine's manipulations. Every word Carl spoke was like a punch to Elaine's carefully constructed facade. I could see her squirming, but she held it together, at least on the surface. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not when I had so much more to fight for. The judge, a man with a gruff demeanor, listened carefully to both sides. He didn't seem to be swayed by Elaine's lawyer's slick words. He seemed impartial, like he was really listening to what we were all saying. My heart raced as Carl wrapped up our case, and then it was my turn. My time to speak. I stood, my knees wobbling beneath me, but I straightened up and faced the judge. Your Honor, I began, my voice trembling at first, but gaining strength as I spoke. This house has been in my family for generations. It's not just a building, it's everything. It's where Sam and I raised our children, where my memories live. It's my legacy. And it was never meant to be something to be sold to the highest bidder. This fight. It's not about money. It's about standing up for what's right. I paused, looking over at Elaine, who hadn't once looked me in the eye. Elaine, you've tried to take this house from me, but you've also tried to take everything Sam and I worked for. You've tried to erase me from his life. But I won't let you do it. Not now. Not ever. The courtroom was silent after my words. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, the weight of it pressing down on everyone in that room. For a moment, I wondered if I had said the right thing, if I had done enough. But when I looked over at George, he gave me a small, encouraging nod. And suddenly, I knew that I had. The judge deliberated for what seemed like an eternity, but in the end, he called us back into the courtroom. His voice was firm when he spoke. I've considered the evidence presented. The will, the debts, and the actions of both parties involved, he began. I find that the house was not meant to be used as leverage for personal gain. Mrs. Caldwell, I am ruling in your favor. You have the right to remain in your home. I could hardly believe my ears. My heart soared. For a moment, I thought I might collapse from the weight of the relief that washed over me. I had one. Elaine's face turned pale, and for the first time, she didn't have a word to say. She had lost. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. The house was mine again. And with it, I had my dignity, my peace, and the chance to rebuild what had been broken. In the days that followed the court ruling, everything seemed to settle back into a strange kind of normal. The house that had once felt like a battleground now felt like a sanctuary again, still standing, still mine. But there was one thing that lingered in the air, like a shadow I couldn't escape. Elaine. I hadn't seen her since the trial. She had left the courthouse in a hurry, her face pale, her posture stiff with defeat. I hadn't expected her to come back to the house. After all, the judge had ruled in my favor, but that didn't stop the tension in the pit of my stomach every time I saw the driveway. I kept expecting her to show up, demanding more. But in the weeks that passed, she didn't. It wasn't until a month later that I finally got the call. It was late afternoon when the phone rang, and I nearly dropped it when I saw her name on the caller ID. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial. The last words she'd said to me were sharp, full of venom. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll make sure of it. Hello? I answered, my voice steady despite the tension building in my chest. Grace. Elaine's voice came through the receiver, softer than I had expected, almost resigned. We need to talk. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I certainly wasn't expecting this. There was something different in her voice, something broken, something human. We agreed to meet at the same diner we'd gone to when Sam was still alive. The place hadn't changed in years, still the same cracked vinyl booths and the same old waitress, who always called me sweetie when she brought my coffee. But this time, the air between Elaine and I felt different. The weight of everything, Sam's death, the court case, the years of silence, hung heavy between us. She was already seated when I arrived, her eyes tired and distant. She hadn't changed much in the last few years, except for the deep lines around her eyes, lines I hadn't noticed before. She wasn't wearing the mask of the confident woman I had seen in court. Now, she seemed defeated. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. I didn't think you'd agree to meet, she said, her voice low as she stirred her coffee, avoiding my gaze. Why did you want to meet? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I wasn't sure if I could handle any more of her lies. She finally looked up, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to find something she had lost. I'm sorry, she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. I was wrong. I've been wrong about everything. I blinked, surprised by the words. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. What do you mean? I've spent my whole life trying to control everything, trying to keep things perfect, even when they weren't, she continued, her voice shaky. After Sam died, I didn't know how to handle it. I thought if I could take the house, everything would be easier, that it would give me some sense of control. But it didn't. It only made things worse. And I hurt you in the process. I was stunned. I had never heard Elaine speak like this. She had always been so sure of herself, so determined to get what she wanted. But now, sitting across from me, she looked like someone who had lost everything, someone who had finally faced the truth. I'm sorry, Grace, she said again, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just scared. Scared. I hadn't expected that. I had spent so long seeing Elaine as the enemy, as the one who was trying to take everything from me. But now, as I looked at her, I realized that she was just as lost as I had been. She was trying to find herself, just like I was. I took a deep breath, the weight of everything finally sinking in. Elaine, I said, my voice softening. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt yourself. But we can't change the past. All we can do is move forward. For the first time, Elaine smiled, just a small, tired smile, but it was enough. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching, and with that, the final chapter of this story began. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with a chance for healing, for both of us. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. We were both broken, but maybe, just maybe, we could put the pieces back together. It's funny how life works. After everything I went through, after all the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, I thought I'd never feel like myself again. But here I am, sitting in the same chair I sat in so many years ago, looking out at the same yard, and for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm fighting anymore. The house is still mine. And it feels more like a home than it ever has. It's as if all the walls that had been built between me and my past are finally coming down. Every room, every hallway, holds memories, good and bad. But the difference now is that I don't feel trapped by them. I've learned that the past doesn't have to define me. It doesn't have to control me. I've let go of so many things that I thought I needed to hold on to. Elaine and I still don't speak often, but when we do, it's different. There's a respect between us now, something I never thought I'd see. She's found her own way, and so have I. We've learned to let go of the things that were never ours to carry. And for the first time in a long time, I feel peace. Lucy, too, has started to understand. It's been slow, but she's been visiting more often. I can see the shift in her, the way she looks at me now, not as some old woman who's out of touch, but as someone who's been through the fire and come out stronger. There's hope there. There's a future. A chance to rebuild what was lost. I've learned so much about myself through this journey. The greatest lesson of all, though, is that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about knowing when to bend, when to stand your ground, and when to let go. I've been broken. I've been bent. But I'm not broken anymore. It's a new beginning for me. And maybe, just maybe, for my family, too. When I look out at the horizon, I don't see just a house anymore. I see a future, my future. And for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to face it. I'm ready to live again, and maybe, just maybe, that's what it's all about, finding the courage to live, even when you think you've lost everything. Because sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come from the darkest places. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. It hasn't been easy, and there were times when I thought I couldn't keep going. But here I am, stronger than ever. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: no matter how old you are, no matter what life throws at you, you always have the power to rise again. I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late to fight for what's right, for what's yours. And if you're facing a struggle right now, remember, the strength you need is already inside of you. You just have to find it. So, with all my heart, I thank you for sharing this chapter of my life with me. And wherever you are, I hope you find the strength to write your own story, one of resilience, peace, and new beginnings.